Jake Martinez stared out the window of the space station and watched the alien ships dock. 3 sleek vessels with curved lines that looked more like art than machines. He had never seen anything like them before. The metal seemed to shift colors, in the starlight, going from deep blue to silver and back again. "Pretty amazing, right?" Lisa Park said as she walked up behind him. She was his best friend on the USS Liberty, and they had served together for 2 years. "Hard to believe we're really meeting aliens." Jake nodded but kept looking at the ships. "Yeah, it's crazy. A month ago, the biggest worry I had was fixing broken radio equipment. Now I'm supposed to help with first contact. The space station, Harmony Point, was huge, bigger than any human structure in space. It was built by a group of alien races who used it for meetings between different species. When the blue-skinned aliens called the Zalari contacted Earth, they suggested meeting here instead of on any home world. Jake's job was simple. He worked with communications and translation equipment. The brass wanted to make sure nothing got lost in translation during the talks. It seemed like easy work, but Jake felt nervous anyway. These were the first aliens humanity had ever met face to face. "Come on," Lisa said. "We should get to the docking bay. The welcome ceremony starts in 10 minutes. They walked through the station's corridors. The place was amazing. The walls showed holographic displays of space, making it feel like they were floating in the void. Other alien species moved past them, some that looked almost human, and others that were completely different. Jake saw a tall creature with 4 arms talking to something that looked like a walking tree. "This place makes me feel very small," Jake said. "You should see the diplomatic quarters," Lisa replied. "Each section is built for different types of aliens. Some breathe different air, some need different gravity. It's like a dozen worlds stuck together." They reached the docking bay just as the Zalari ship finished connecting to the station. Jake stood with the other human crew members trying to look professional. Admiral Collins was there with the main diplomatic team. The man looked calm, but Jake could see tension in his eyes. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. 3 figures walked out, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. The Zalari were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. They had blue skin that seemed to glow softly, and their features were sharp and perfect. They moved like dancers, each step graceful and planned. The leader was a tall male with silver markings on his forehead. He spoke in accented but perfect English. "Greetings from the Zalari Empire. I am Ambassador Vextar. We come in peace and friendship." Admiral Collins stepped forward and gave the prepared response. Jake barely listened to the formal words. His attention was caught by the female Zalari standing behind the ambassador. She was smaller than the others, with darker blue skin and bright eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. When her gaze met his, she smiled slightly. The ceremony was short and polite. Both sides exchanged gifts and spoke about hope for the future. Jake noticed that other alien species in the docking bay watched from a distance. Most seemed curious, but a few looked worried. After the formal meeting, the group separated. The Zalari were shown to their quarters while the humans went to theirs. Jake was walking back to his room when someone called his name. "Excuse me, Jake Martinez?" He turned around. It was the female Zalari from the ceremony. Up close, she was even more striking. Her voice had a musical quality that made him think of wind chimes. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" "I am Lisa. I was told you work with communications. I hoped we could speak about human language and culture. I find your species very interesting." Jake felt his cheeks get warm. "Sure, I guess. I mean, I'm not an expert or anything. I just work with radio equipment and translation programs." "Perfect. Lisa said, and her smile was bright. I speak your language well, but I want to understand how humans really communicate, the emotions behind the words. Would you be willing to teach me? Yes, of course. When would you like to start? Now, if you have time. There is an observation deck nearby. We could watch the stars and talk. Jake looked around. He didn't see any rules against it, and she seemed friendly enough. Okay, lead the way. The observation deck was a large room with windows that showed space in all directions. A few other beings were there, but they gave Jake and Lisa plenty of space. They sat on a bench designed for humanoid species. This is amazing, Jake said, looking out at the stars. I grew up on Earth, so I never got used to seeing space like this. You lived on your home world your whole life? Lisa asked. She seemed surprised. Most humans do. Space travel is still pretty new for us. Only military and scientists usually leave Earth. How interesting. Most species begin exploring space much earlier in their development. Humans seem to be different in many ways. They talked for over an hour. Lisa asked many questions about Earth, human culture, and Jake's personal life. She was especially curious about human families and relationships. Jake found himself talking more than he usually did with strangers. There was something about her that made conversation easy. Your species has such interesting customs, Lisa said when he finished explaining human holidays. The way you celebrate with food and gifts and gathering family together, it sounds very warm. What about your people? What are Zilari celebrations like? For the first time, Lisa hesitated. We have our own traditions. Perhaps I will tell you about them another time. Jake noticed the change in her mood, but didn't push. Well, I should probably get back. Early day tomorrow. Of course. Thank you for talking with me, Jake. I hope we can speak again soon. As Jake walked back to his quarters, he couldn't stop thinking about Lisa. She was beautiful and interesting, but something felt off. He couldn't put his finger on what it was. Maybe it was the way she asked so many personal questions, or how she avoided talking about her own culture. He shook his head. He was probably just nervous about the whole alien contact situation. Tomorrow he would focus on his job and try not to think about bright blue eyes and musical voices, but as he fell asleep that night, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just become much more complicated. The next 3 days passed in a blur of meetings and cultural exchanges. Jake spent most of his time monitoring communication systems, but Lisa found reasons to visit him almost every day. She always had questions about human culture or wanted his help understanding some piece of human technology. I don't get it, Lisa said on the third morning as they ate breakfast in the human quarters. Why does she keep coming to you? There are actual cultural experts on the diplomatic team. Jake stirred his coffee and tried to look casual. Maybe she just feels comfortable talking to me. I'm less intimidating than the diplomats. Jake, she's been asking you about marriage customs for 2 days straight. That doesn't seem like casual cultural interest. Jake had noticed that, too. Yesterday, Lisa had spent an hour asking about human wedding ceremonies. She wanted to know everything: who proposed to whom, what the ceremonies looked like, what promises people made to each other. When he asked why she was so interested, she just said her people were fascinated by bonding rituals. She's probably just being thorough, Jake said, but he didn't really believe it himself. That afternoon, Lisa asked him to show her the human recreation area. It was a small section of the station designed to make humans feel at home, with earth, plants, and familiar furniture. They sat in what was supposed to look like a park, complete with fake grass and recorded bird sounds. "This is nice," Lisa said, touching one of the artificial flowers. "Humans really need to be surrounded by life, don't they?" "I guess so. Most of our cities have parks and gardens. We like green spaces. And you form permanent bonds with mates in these green spaces?" Jake almost choked on his drink. "Sometimes. Some people get married in gardens or parks. Others prefer churches or beaches or even space stations, I suppose." The male asks the female to bond permanently. "Usually, but not always. Sometimes. Women propose to men. Sometimes both people decide together. It depends on the couple." Lisa seemed to file this information away carefully. "And when the male asks, what does he say exactly?" "Well, there's no set script. People say what feels right to them. Some people plan big speeches, others just say, 'Will you marry me?' when the moment feels right." "When the moment feels right," Lisa repeated slowly. "So it can be spontaneous?" "Sure. Some of the best proposals happen that way." Jake was starting to feel uncomfortable with all the marriage questions, but Lisa's next question surprised him even more. "What about dowries? Does the female's family provide resources to the male's family? Dowries? That's pretty old-fashioned. Most humans don't do that anymore. Why do you ask?" "Just curious about your customs." But Lisa's tone was different now, more serious. "Among my people, bonding ceremonies involve exchanges, resources, territories, sometimes even political agreements. That sounds more like a business deal than a marriage. Perhaps. But it ensures that bonds serve a greater purpose than just personal happiness." Jake didn't like the way that sounded, but before he could ask more questions, his communicator beeped. It was a message from Admiral Collins asking all crew members to report for a briefing. "I have to go," Jake said, standing up. "Work calls." "Of course. Thank you for another educational conversation, Jake." The briefing was in the main conference room. Admiral Collins looked tired, and the other officers seemed tense. Jake took a seat next to Lisa and waited. "I want to address some concerns that have come up during our negotiations," the Admiral began. "Several species on this station have approached us with warnings about the Zalari." Jake felt his stomach drop. Lisa shot him a worried look. "What kind of warnings, sir?" asked Commander Hayes, the station's diplomatic officer. "Nothing specific, but the pattern is consistent. Other species seem to avoid close contact with the Zalari. When we ask why, we get vague responses about their expansion methods and unusual diplomatic practices." "Are we in danger?" someone asked. "We don't think so, at least not immediate physical danger. But we need to be careful. The Zalari have asked for several things that seem odd for a peaceful first contact mission." Admiral Collins activated a holographic display showing a list. "They've requested detailed information about human government structure, military command chains, and legal systems. They're particularly interested in how humans form binding legal agreements." Jake's mouth went dry. Lisa's questions about marriage suddenly seemed much more sinister. They've also asked for the personal files of specific crew members, claiming they want to choose the best cultural liaisons. We've refused, of course, but it's concerning. After the briefing, Jake walked back to his quarters feeling sick. Lisa caught up with him in the corridor. "Jake, you need to be careful around that Zalari girl. Her name is Lisa." "I don't care what her name is. Didn't you hear what the Admiral said? They're asking for personal files and information about legal agreements. All those questions about marriage? That's not innocent curiosity." Jake wanted to argue, but he couldn't. The timing was too perfect. "Maybe you're right. But what could she possibly want with information about human marriage customs? I don't know, but promise me you'll be more careful. Don't tell her anything else about yourself or human culture until we figure out what's going on, Jake promised. But that evening, when Lisa came to find him, he found it hard to stay suspicious. She seemed genuinely interested in his stories about Earth, and she laughed at his jokes in a way that made him feel clever and interesting. I brought something to share with you, she said, producing a small device from her robes. It's Zalari music. I thought you might enjoy it. The device projected soft, harmonic sounds that seemed to resonate in Jake's bones. It was beautiful, unlike anything he had ever heard. This is amazing, he said. It's like I can feel the music, not just hear it. Zalari music is designed to create emotional connections. We believe that shared harmony creates understanding between people. They sat listening to the music for a while. Jake found himself relaxing despite his earlier worries. The melodies seemed to wash away his anxiety. Jake, Lisa said softly, may I ask you something personal? Sure. Are you bonded to anyone? Do you have a mate waiting for you on Earth? The question caught him off guard. No, I'm not married. I mean, I've dated people, but nothing serious. My job keeps me busy, and space travel makes relationships complicated. So you're free to form new bonds? I guess so. Why? I'm just trying to understand human social structures. Among my people, unmated adults are considered available for political arrangements. Political arrangements? Marriages that serve the needs of families or governments rather than personal choice. Jake felt uncomfortable again. That sounds awful. Humans usually marry for love. Love, Lisa repeated as if testing the word. Such a simple concept, but so powerful. I think I'm beginning to understand why other species find humans so unpredictable. That night, Jake lay awake thinking about the conversation. Something was definitely wrong, but he couldn't figure out what. Lisa seemed to genuinely care about him, but her questions were too focused, too specific, and the way she talked about political marriages made him nervous. He decided that tomorrow he would be more careful about what he told her. But even as he made that decision, he found himself looking forward to seeing her again. There was something about her that drew him in, despite all the warning signs. Jake fell asleep to the memory of Zalari music still echoing in his mind, unaware that the harmonics had been specifically designed to make him more trusting and open to suggestion. In her quarters across the station, Lisa was reviewing recordings of their conversations and updating her mission files. The trap was almost ready to spring. Jake tried to keep his distance from Lisa the next day, but she found him anyway. He was working in the communication center when she appeared at his shoulder like a ghost. Hello, Jake. I was hoping we could continue our cultural discussions. I'm pretty busy today, he said, not looking up from his equipment. Maybe later. Please? I have something special to share with you. It will only take a few minutes. Jake looked at her face and saw something that might have been hurt in her bright eyes. Against his better judgment, he found himself nodding. Okay, but just for a little while. She led him to a part of the station he had never seen before. The Arboretum. It was a huge room filled with plants from dozens of different worlds. The air was warm and humid, and strange flowers glowed with their own light. The ceiling was transparent, showing the stars outside. This is incredible, Jake said, forgetting his suspicions for a moment. I had no idea this place existed. It's one of my favorite spots on the station, Lisa said. So much life from so many worlds, all growing together in harmony. It reminds me that different species can coexist peacefully. They walked along a path between towering trees with silver bark and flowers that chimed like bells when the artificial wind touched them. Jake found himself relaxing despite his promise to be careful. "Lisa, can I ask you something?" "Of course. The other day you mentioned political marriages among your people. Do you have someone waiting for you at home?" Lisa was quiet for a long moment. "That's complicated. My family has certain expectations for my future, but I'm not bound to anyone yet." "That must be hard, not being able to choose for yourself." "It's the way things are done among the Zalari. Personal desires are less important than duty to the Empire." They sat down on a bench made from what looked like living wood. Around them, alien plants swayed in the gentle breeze. Jake watched Lisa's profile as she stared up at the stars through the ceiling. "Can I tell you a secret?" she said suddenly. "Sure. I've never experienced what humans call love. The emotion you described, where two people choose each other based on feelings rather than politics or duty. It sounds wonderful." Jake felt his heart skip. There was something vulnerable in her voice that made him want to comfort her. "It is wonderful when it happens, but it's also scary and complicated. Tell me what it feels like." Jake thought about it. "It's like finding someone who makes you want to be better than you are. Someone who laughs at your jokes and listens when you talk about things that matter to you. Someone you can't imagine living without." "That sounds magical." "I guess it is, in a way." Lisa turned to look at him. "Jake, may I share something from my culture with you? A poem? I'd like that." She began to speak in her own language, and the words were like music. Even though Jake couldn't understand them, he felt their meaning somehow. They spoke of connection across impossible distances, of souls finding each other in the darkness, of space. "What does it mean?" he asked when she finished. "It's about the binding of souls across the void, two spirits becoming one, sharing everything until death and beyond. That's beautiful. In my language, it's called Karthel Nevan, the eternal joining. It's what we say when two people become permanently bound to each other." Jake felt something stir in his chest. The way she said the words, the look in her eyes, the setting with all the beautiful alien plants around them. It was like something from a dream. "If someone said that to you," he asked, "what would it mean?" "It would mean they wanted to bind their life to mine forever. That they were willing to share everything. Their thoughts, their feelings, their very soul." Jake stared at her. In the soft light of the glowing flowers, she looked almost ethereal. Her blue skin seemed to shimmer, and her eyes held depths he could fall into forever. That's incredible," he said. Lisa smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing Jake had ever seen. "You think so?" "Yeah. I mean, to find someone you'd want to share everything with? To love someone that much? That's what everyone hopes for. Even if it meant leaving your old life behind, becoming part of something bigger than yourself? If it was the right person, yeah, absolutely." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the alien plants sway in the artificial breeze. Jake felt a warmth in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. There was something about Lisa that made him feel like he could tell her anything. "Jake," she said softly, "when humans find that kind of love, what do? Well, usually, they get married, they promise to stay together and take care of each other. And how does the male ask the female to marry him?" Jake grinned. There's no rule book. Some guys plan elaborate proposals with rings and flowers and speeches. Others just say what's in their heart when the moment feels right. When the moment feels right, Lisa repeated, just like she had before. Yeah, sometimes the best proposals are the ones that just happen naturally. Lisa leaned closer to him. Show me. Show you what? How a human male would propose to someone. He loved, Jake laughed nervously. I can't just demonstrate a proposal. That's not how it works. Please? I want to understand the emotion behind it. The spontaneity you described. Jake looked at her earnest face and felt his resistance crumble. Okay, but this is just pretend, right? Just to show you how it works? Of course, just an example. Jake took a deep breath and tried to imagine how he would really propose to someone he loved. He looked at Lisa sitting there in the starlight, beautiful and interested and waiting for his answer. For a moment he let himself pretend that this was real. Well, he said, his voice softer than before, I guess I'd start by telling her how she makes me feel. How being with her is like finding a part of myself I didn't know was missing. Lisa's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't interrupt. And I'd tell her that I can't imagine my life without her in it, that every day with her is better than the best day I had before we met. Go on, Lisa whispered. Jake felt himself getting caught up in the fantasy. Then I'd tell her that I want to spend the rest of my life making her happy, that I want to share everything with her, the good times and the bad times, the adventures and the quiet moments. And then? Jake grinned, feeling lighthearted and happy in the romantic setting. Well, if you're going to quote poetry like that about eternal joining and souls becoming one, I guess I'll have to marry you then. The words left his mouth before he realized what he had said. It was meant to be a joke, a playful reference to the poem she had shared. He expected her to laugh at his silly attempt at humor. Instead, Lisa's expression changed completely. Her eyes went wide with something that looked like triumph. Before Jake could react, she reached into her robes and pulled out a crystal device that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. I accept your proposal, Jake Martinez of Earth, she said in a voice that carried new harmonics, as if she was speaking some kind of ritual formula. Wait, what? Lisa, I was just joking. But she was already pressing the crystal device into his palm. The moment it touched his skin, it became warm and began to glow brighter. Jake tried to pull his hand away, but the crystal seemed to stick to his palm. By the laws of the Zalari Empire and the witnessed bond words you have spoken under the eternal stars, we are now joined in Carthel Nevan, Lisa continued, her voice taking on a ceremonial tone that made Jake's blood run cold. The crystal suddenly flared with bright light. Jake felt something like electricity shoot up his arm and into his chest. He tried to drop the device, but it was already fusing with his skin, becoming part of his hand. Lisa, what's happening? What is this thing? Her expression shifted from joy to something much more calculating. You should feel honored, Jake. I am Lisa Carthel, third daughter of the Zalari Empress, and you, my dear husband, have just become the legal gateway for humanity's integration into our empire. Jake stared at her in horror as the crystal continued to spread tendrils of energy up his arm. Husband? Integration? What are you talking about? The Zalari Empire expands through matrimonial conquest, Lisa explained, her voice now cold and professional. By binding myself to a key member of your species, I established legal claim over Earth under imperial law. Your marriage to me makes me a citizen of your world, and makes you a citizen of mine. This is insane. You can't conquer a planet by marrying one person, can't I? You work in communications. You have security clearances. Your psychological profile indicated you would be susceptible to emotional manipulation. Lisa stood up, looking down at him with alien eyes that no longer seemed beautiful. Every conversation we've had, every moment we've shared, was designed to bring us to this point. Jake felt sick. You've been planning this from the beginning. Of course. My people studied your crew files before we arrived. You were the perfect target. Lonely, romantic, trusting. A communications specialist with access to your military networks. The crystal was now fully integrated into Jake's hand, glowing softly with blue light. He could feel it doing something to his nervous system, like ice water flowing through his veins. "Help!" Jake shouted, his voice echoing through the arboretum. "Somebody help me!" "No one can help you now," Lisa said calmly. "The binding is complete. In 72 hours, the crystal will have fully integrated with your neural pathways. You'll become a willing servant of the Zalari Empire, and your—" Jake's screams brought station security running within minutes. Lisa was the first to reach the arboretum, followed by Commander Hayes and a team of armed guards. They found Jake on his knees, clutching his hand, while Lisa stood over him with a satisfied expression. "What happened here?" Commander Hayes demanded, his weapon drawn but not pointed at anyone yet. "Jake needs medical attention," Lisa said, kneeling beside her friend. "Something's wrong with his hand." Jake held up his palm, showing them the crystal that now seemed to be part of his skin. It pulsed with blue light in rhythm with his heartbeat. "She tricked me," he said through gritted teeth. "She made me say something, and now this thing is attached to me." Commander Hayes looked at Lisa, who stood calmly with her hands visible. "Ma'am, I need you to explain what happened here." "Jake Martinez has become my husband according to Zalari law," Lisa said simply. "The bonding crystal confirms our legal union. As my mate, he is now under the protection of the Zalari Empire." "Husband?" Lisa stared at Jake in shock. "Jake, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything. I was just showing her how human proposals work. It was a joke." "Jokes can have serious consequences," Lisa said. Jake spoke the ritual words in the presence of the eternal stars. He accepted the bond willingly. Commander Hayes activated his communicator. "Admiral Collins, we have a situation in the Arboretum. I need you here immediately." While they waited for the Admiral, Lisa helped Jake to his feet. The crystal in his hand was getting warmer, and Jake could feel something spreading up his arm, like a slow burn. "Can we cut it out?" Jake asked. "I wouldn't recommend that," Lisa said. "The bonding crystal is now part of your nervous system. Removing it would likely kill you." Admiral Collins arrived with Dr. Amanda Foster, the station's head physician, and several other officers. The Admiral took one look at Jake's hand, and his face went pale. "Dear God," he whispered. "It's true." "Sir?" Commander Hayes looked confused. "Get everyone to the secure briefing room. Now. And seal the Arboretum. This is now a classified area." They moved to the briefing room quickly. Dr. Foster examined Jake's hand with her scanner while Admiral Collins paced at the front of the room. "The crystal is integrated with his nervous system," Dr. Foster reported. "It's sending some kind of signal through his neural pathways. I've never seen anything like it." "You have, actually," Admiral Collins said grimly. 3 weeks ago, intelligence reports from the Altarian Federation described exactly this scenario. We just didn't believe it could be real." Jake felt his stomach drop. "What scenario?" Admiral Collins activated the room's holographic display. It showed star maps with red zones marked throughout the galaxy. The Zalari Empire has conquered 17 different species in the last 50 years, but they don't use armies or weapons. They use marriage. That's impossible, Lisa said. You can't conquer a planet by marrying someone. You can if your legal system recognizes it, Admiral Collins explained. The Zalari have developed what they call matrimonial conquest. They identify key individuals from target species and manipulate them into participating in Zalari bonding ceremonies. The display showed images of other aliens with crystals similar to Jake's embedded in their bodies. Once the bonding is complete, the individual becomes a legal citizen of the Zalari Empire. But more importantly, they become a conduit for Zalari, influence and control. Dr. Foster continued scanning Jake's hand. The crystal is releasing some kind of neurotransmitter. In about 72 hours, his brain chemistry will be permanently altered. Altered how? Jake asked, though he was afraid of the answer. You'll become psychologically dependent on Zalari approval, Admiral Collins said. A willing puppet who thinks he's making his own choices. You'll use your security clearances to give them access to our military networks. You'll argue for Earth, to join their empire voluntarily. Jake looked at Lisa, who was sitting quietly in the corner under guard. Every conversation we had, you were planning this. Yes, she said without shame. Your psychological profile indicated you would respond well to emotional manipulation. You're intelligent but lonely, romantic but practical. The perfect combination. For our purposes, why me specifically? You have access to human communication systems. Your security clearance would give us entry to your military networks. And your personality type made you easy to manipulate. Lisa stood up angrily. You sick, twisted... Careful, Lisa interrupted. Jake is now my husband under Zalari law. Any threat to me is a threat to him. The bonding crystal will interpret hostility toward me as an attack on Jake's well-being. As if to prove her point, Jake suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest when Lisa moved toward Lisa. It's true, he gasped. I can feel it. The crystal doesn't want anyone to hurt her. Admiral Collins rubbed his forehead. This is exactly what happened to the other species. The bonded individual becomes unable to act against Zalari interests, even when they want to. So what do we do? Commander Hayes asked. Zalari law grants Jake diplomatic immunity as the spouse of a member of their royal family, Admiral Collins explained. They'll demand his transfer to their custody within hours. Once he's on their ship, the conversion process will accelerate. Can't we just refuse to hand him over? Not without starting a war. And Jake will be dead in 72 hours anyway if we can't reverse the bonding. Dr. Foster looked up from her scanner. There might be a way. The crystal creates a two-way neural link. Jake is being influenced by Lisa, but she's also connected to him. If we can figure out how to use that connection... What are you thinking? Admiral Collins asked. The bonding works by making the victim psychologically dependent on their Zalari mate. But what if we could reverse the flow? What if Jake could influence Lisa instead of the other way around? Jake felt a spark of hope. How would that work? I'm not sure yet. But the crystal is designed to create emotional bonds. It assumes the Zalari will be the dominant partner because they understand how it works. But Jake has something most of their victims don't. What's that? He knows he's being manipulated. Most victims don't realize what's happening until it's too late. Jake still has his free will, at least for now. Admiral Collins looked thoughtful. Even if we could reverse the influence, we'd still need to deal with Zalari law. They're not going to just let us undo their conquest attempt. Actually, Commander Hayes said slowly. There might be something there. Jake, when exactly did you agree to marry her? I didn't agree to anything. I was making a joke about human proposals. But what exactly did you say? Jake tried to remember. I said something like, if you're going to quote poetry about eternal joining, I guess I'll have to marry you then. But it was obviously a joke. Was it obvious to her? Commander Hayes asked. Did you explain that you were joking? Well, no, but... So from her perspective, you made a formal proposal and she accepted. Admiral Collins caught on. You're thinking about consent laws. Exactly. Human law requires informed consent for marriage. Jake was clearly not informed about what he was agreeing to. Under human legal standards, this marriage is invalid. Lisa spoke up from her chair. Human law is irrelevant. Zalari law governs all bonding ceremonies performed by Zalari citizens. But Jake isn't a Zalari citizen, Commander Hayes pointed out. He's human, and he was deceived about the nature of what he was agreeing to. The bonding crystal makes him a Zalari citizen automatically. Does it, or does he have to choose to accept citizenship? For the first time since the crystal had attached to his hand, Jake saw uncertainty in Lisa's eyes. The bonding creates automatic citizenship. It's imperial law. But Jake didn't know that when he spoke, Dr. Foster said. He thought he was making a joke about human marriage customs. He never consented to become a Zalari citizen. Admiral Collins smiled grimly. I think we might have a legal challenge here. If Jake can prove he was deceived, we might be able to invalidate the bonding under interspecies law. That's impossible, Lisa said, but she sounded less certain now. Is it? Jake asked, feeling the crystal pulse in his hand. Through the neural link, he could sense Lisa's growing worry. Because it sounds to me like your whole conquest plan depends on fraud. And the last I checked, fraud invalidates contracts in most legal systems. For the first time since this nightmare began, Jake felt like they might have a chance. 3 weeks after the tribunal, Jake thought his life would return to normal. He was wrong. The news of humanity's legal victory over the Zalari had spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Every day brought new messages to Harmony. Point from species Jake had never heard of. Some wanted to congratulate Earth on their clever defense. Others wanted to form alliances. A few seemed angry that humans had disrupted what they called the natural order of things. You've become famous, Lisa said, showing Jake another batch of messages on her tablet. Look at this one. It's from something called the Keth Collective. They want to hire you as a legal consultant. Jake rubbed his forehead. The spot where the crystal had been attached still felt tender, though Dr. Foster said it was healing well. I don't want to be famous. I just want to go back to fixing radio equipment. Too late for that, Admiral Collins said as he entered the communications center. Jake, we need to talk. They walked to the Admiral's office where Commander Hayes was waiting with a serious expression. Jake felt his stomach drop. He had learned to recognize that look. What's wrong now? Jake asked. We've been monitoring Zalari communications since the trial, Admiral Collins began. They're not happy about losing, but more importantly, they're not giving up. What do you mean? Commander Hayes activated a holographic display showing intercepted Zalari messages. They can't use matrimonial conquest anymore. Your victory made that impossible. But they're adapting. They're trying to find other ways to establish legal claims on Earth. Like what? Trade agreements with hidden clauses, cultural exchange programs that give them permanent residency rights, scientific cooperation treaties that include territorial concessions. Jake stared at the display. They're still trying to conquer Earth, just using different methods. Exactly. And there's something else. Admiral Collins looked uncomfortable. They've put a bounty on your head. A what? Not to kill you, Commander Hayes said quickly. They want you alive. Apparently, you've become a symbol of resistance to Zalari expansion. Other species are studying what you did and applying similar tactics. The Zalari Empire is losing ground for the first time in decades. Jake felt dizzy. So they want to capture me? Or recruit you? We intercepted communications, suggesting they might try to convince you to work for them voluntarily. That's insane. Why would I ever help them after what they did? Admiral Collins and Commander Hayes exchanged glances. Jake, there's something else you need to know about the bonding crystal. Dr. Foster entered the office carrying a medical scanner and looking worried. I've been running tests on the residual effects of the crystal. Jake, the neural pathways it created in your brain haven't completely disappeared. What does that mean? It means you still have traces of the psychic connection with Lisa. It's weak, but it's there. Jake felt his heart skip. I can still sense her, sometimes. And she can probably sense you too. Is that dangerous? Dr. Foster hesitated. We don't know. The connection is too weak for mind control, but it might allow for communication across vast distances. Potentially, it could be used to track your location. Admiral Collins leaned forward. Jake, I'm going to be direct with you. Earth Command wants to transfer you back to Earth immediately. They think you'll be safer there. And what do you think? I think the Zalari will never stop trying to get to you as long as you represent a threat to their expansion. But I also think hiding on Earth won't solve the problem. Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see ships from a dozen different species docked at the station. Representatives from worlds he had never heard of. All of them, now aware that humans could be dangerous opponents in ways they hadn't expected. What if I don't go back to Earth? Jake asked. What do you mean? What if I stay here? Keep working with other species who want to resist Zalari expansion. That would be incredibly dangerous, Dr. Foster said. You'd be a target for the rest of your life. I'm already a target. At least this way, I might be able to help other people avoid what happened to me. Jake turned back to face the others. Admiral, how many species has the Zalari Empire conquered? 17. That we know of. And how many of those conquests could have been prevented if someone had warned them about matrimonial conquest? Admiral Collins was quiet for a moment. Probably most of them. Then I think I have a job to do. Over the next few days, Jake worked with the station's diplomatic corps to establish what they called the Consent Protocol, a set of legal guidelines that species could use to protect themselves from deceptive bonding ceremonies and similar conquest tactics. The work was harder than Jake had expected. Every species had different legal systems, different concepts of marriage and citizenship, different ways of forming binding agreements. What worked for humans might not work for beings who communicated through color changes or species that reproduced. By splitting in half. The key is informed consent, Jake explained to a delegation of butterfly-like creatures called the Moth-Tel. No one should be able to bind you legally without explaining exactly what you're agreeing to. One of the Moth-Tel, whose wings shimmered with blue and gold patterns, spoke in a voice like rustling leaves. But our people often make agreements through dance. How can we ensure informed consent when the agreement is expressed through movement rather than words? It was a good question, and Jake found himself working late into the night to find solutions. Each species brought new challenges, new ways that the consent protocol needed to be adapted. "You're enjoying this," Lisa observed one evening as she found Jake still working in the conference room at midnight. "Is that bad?" "No, it's good. You seem more confident than you've been since the whole crystal thing happened." Jake saved his work and leaned back in his chair. "I feel like I'm doing something important, something that matters." "You are. But Jake, you need to be careful. There are rumors that Zalari agents are trying to infiltrate the station." "What kind of rumors?" "People in disguise. False identities. Dr. Foster thinks they might be looking for a way to get close to you again." As if summoned by their conversation, Jake suddenly felt a familiar tingle in the back of his mind. It was faint, like hearing a distant radio station, but unmistakable. Lisa was trying to communicate through their weakened neural link. "Jake, are you okay?" Lisa asked, noticing his expression. "She's trying to contact me. Lisa. I can feel her in my head." "Should I call Dr. Foster?" "No, wait. Let me see what she wants." Jake closed his eyes and concentrated on the faint mental connection. Slowly, words began to form in his mind, not heard but somehow understood. "Jake, danger. Coming for you. Not safe." The connection was too weak for clear communication, but the emotional content was unmistakable. Lisa was afraid. Not for herself, but for him. "She's trying to warn me about something," Jake said, opening his eyes. "Warn you about what?" Before Jake could answer, the station's alarm system activated. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside, and an automated voice announced, "Security alert. All personnel report to designated safe zones immediately." Lisa grabbed Jake's arm. "Come on, we need to get out of here." But as they reached the door, three figures in environmental suits blocked their path. Their faces were hidden behind reflective visors, but something about their movements seemed familiar. "Jake Martinez," one of them said in a voice that was definitely not human. "You will come with us." "I don't think so," Jake replied, backing away from the door. The figure reached up and removed its helmet, revealing the face of a Zalari male Jake had never seen before. "My name is Vex Carr, brother to Lisa Carthel. The Empress has decided that if we cannot claim you through marriage, we will claim you through force." Jake felt the mental connection with Lisa spike with panic and fear. Through their weakened link, he sensed her desperation to protect him, even though she was probably light years away. "The tribunal declared the bonding invalid," Lisa said. "You have no legal claim to him." "Legal claims are for civilized negotiation," Vexcar replied. "The Empress has grown tired of civilization." More Zalari agents appeared in the corridor behind them. Jake realized they were trapped, and this time there would be no clever legal arguments to save him. But as the Zalari moved closer, Jake felt something unexpected through his connection with Lisa. She wasn't just afraid for him, she was angry. Furious at her own people for breaking the tribunal's ruling and resorting to crude kidnapping. And in that anger, Jake sensed an opportunity. If Lisa was truly opposed to what her people were doing, maybe she could help him escape. The question was whether their weakened neural link would be strong enough for him to reach her across the vast distances of space. Jake closed his eyes and pushed every ounce of his will through the connection, hoping that somewhere in the galaxy, a blue-skinned princess would hear his call for help. The next few hours moved like a whirlwind. Jake sat in the medical bay while Dr. Foster ran every test she could think of on the crystal fused to his hand. Meanwhile, Admiral Collins and his legal team worked frantically to build a case against the Zalari bonding. "The neural connection is getting stronger," Dr. Foster reported. "But Interestingly, it's working both ways. Jake, can you sense Lisa's emotions? Jake concentrated on the warm pulse in his hand. Yes, actually. She's worried and angry. She didn't expect us to fight back like this. Good. That means the bond isn't as one-sided as she claimed. Lisa sat beside Jake's medical bed, holding his free hand. How are you feeling? Scared, angry, but also, I don't know, determined, like I'm not going to let them win. Admiral Collins entered the medical bay with a grim expression. The Zalari have formally requested Jake's transfer to their custody. They're claiming diplomatic privilege and threatening to leave if we don't comply. Let them leave, Jake said. Good riddance. It's not that simple. If they leave now, they'll report back to their empire that humanity is hostile. We could be looking at an invasion fleet in 6 months. So what are our options? We challenge the marriage under interspecies law. There's a tribunal system here on the station for exactly these kinds of disputes. If we can prove the bonding was fraudulent, we might be able to invalidate it. Dr. Foster looked up from her scanner. How long do we have? The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. The Zalari couldn't refuse without admitting they have something to hide. Jake felt another pulse from the crystal and sensed Lisa's growing panic through their connection. She's really scared now. I don't think this has ever happened before. What do you mean? I think we're the first species to challenge their legal system. Everyone else either fought and lost or just gave up. Admiral Collins nodded. That matches our intelligence reports. The Zalari rely on other species being too intimidated or confused to mount a proper legal defense. So what's our strategy? We prove 3 things. First, that you were deceived about the nature of what you were agreeing to. Second, that you never consented to become a Zalari citizen. And third, that the entire matrimonial conquest system violates basic principles of consent and free will. The next morning, the main conference hall of Harmony Point was packed with representatives from dozens of species. Word had spread quickly about the unusual legal challenge, and everyone wanted to see what would happen. Jake sat at a table with Admiral Collins and the human legal team. His hand still pulsed with blue light from the crystal, and he could feel Lisa's nervous energy through their connection. She sat with the Zalari delegation, looking calm, but Jake could sense the worry underneath. The tribunal was made up of 3 judges from different species: a tall, gray-skinned Altarian, a crystalline being called a Vex, and a reptilian creature Jake didn't recognize. The lead judge, the Altarian, called the session to order. We are here to determine the validity of a bonding ceremony between Jake Martinez of Earth and Lisa Carthel of the Zalari Empire. The Zalari claim the bonding is legal and binding. The humans claim it was performed under false pretenses. The A. Zalari lawyer, a tall male with silver markings, spoke first. The facts are simple. Jake Martinez spoke the ritual words of bonding in the presence of the eternal stars. Lisa Carthel accepted his proposal according to Zalari law. The bonding crystal confirms their union. There is no fraud here, only the lawful expansion of the Zalari Empire. Admiral Collins stood to respond. Your Honors, this case is about more than just one marriage. It's about whether conquest through deception can be considered legitimate under interspecies law. Jake watched Lisa's face as Admiral Collins laid out their case. Through the neural link, he could feel her surprise at how thoroughly the humans had researched Zalari law and found its weaknesses. Jake Martinez was never informed that his words would be interpreted as a marriage proposal, Admiral Collins continued. He was told he was participating in a cultural demonstration. He was not informed about the bonding crystal, the neural modification, or the legal implications of the ceremony. Ignorance of Zalari law is not a defense, the Zalari lawyer argued. But this wasn't ignorance, Admiral Collins shot back. This was deliberate deception. Lisa Carthel spent days building trust with Mr. Martinez, learning about human customs, and manipulating him into a vulnerable emotional state. She never once mentioned that her questions about marriage were anything more than cultural curiosity. The crystalline judge spoke with a voice like wind chimes. What evidence do you present for this deception? Admiral Collins activated a holographic display showing recordings of Jake and Lisa's conversations. These recordings show a pattern of manipulation and misdirection. At no point did Lisa inform Jake that Zalari bonding ceremonies were legally binding on non-Zalari citizens. Jake felt Lisa's anger spike through their connection. She hadn't known their conversations were being recorded. Furthermore, Admiral Collins continued, we have evidence that this pattern of deception is standard Zalari practice. The display showed intelligence reports from other conquered species. 17 different worlds, 17 different victims, all of them manipulated in similar ways. The Zalari deliberately target lonely, trusting individuals and exploit their emotional vulnerabilities. The reptilian judge hissed softly. This tribunal has seen evidence of Zalari expansion methods before. They are concerning. The Zalari lawyer stood quickly. The expansion of our empire is legal under our own laws and treaties with other species. We seek willing integration, not conquest. Willing? Admiral Collins asked. Jake, please tell the tribunal how willing you feel right now. Jake stood up, holding his crystal-embedded hand where everyone could see it. I didn't agree to any of this. I thought I was making a joke about human marriage customs. I never consented to have this thing attached to my body. I never agreed to become a Zalari citizen, and I certainly never agreed to help them conquer my planet. Through the neural link, Jake felt Lisa's emotions shifting. Beneath her anger and fear, he sensed something else. Guilt. She was actually feeling bad about what she had done to him. The bonding crystal creates a two-way connection, Jake continued, surprising everyone, including himself. I can feel Lisa's emotions right now, and you know what? She feels guilty. She knows what she did was wrong. Lisa stood up angrily. That's not true, isn't it? Jake looked directly at her. You told me you'd never experienced love. You said your people only marry for political reasons. But through this connection, I can feel that you actually did develop feelings for me. Real feelings. And that's why you feel guilty about betraying me. The Zalari lawyer tried to object, but Jake kept talking. This whole conquest system works because your people assume other species are too primitive or too weak to fight back, but humans don't give up when things get hard. We find solutions. Jake felt the crystal pulse in his hand, and suddenly he understood something. The neural link works both ways. Lisa has been trying to influence me, but I can influence her too. He concentrated on the connection, pushing his own emotions through it, his sense of betrayal, his determination to protect Earth, his genuine care for Lisa despite everything she had done. Through the link, he felt her defenses crumble. Tell them the truth, Lisa, Jake said softly. Tell them how you really feel about what you've done. Lisa stood frozen for a long moment, tears forming in her bright blue eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. He's right. I deceived him. I manipulated his emotions and exploited his trust, and I did develop feelings for him. real feelings, which makes what I did even worse. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. The Zalari delegation looked stunned. This bonding was performed. Under false pretenses, Lysa continued, her voice getting stronger. Jake never consented to Zalari citizenship or neural modification. The marriage is invalid. The lead judge conferred with the other two for several minutes before announcing their decision. This tribunal finds that the bonding ceremony was performed without proper consent from one party. The marriage is declared invalid under interspecies law. As the judge spoke, Jake felt the crystal in his hand grow warm. Instead of fighting the sensation, he pushed his own will through the neural link. To his amazement, the crystal began to loosen its grip on his skin. Furthermore, the judge continued, this tribunal finds the Zalari practice of matrimonial conquest to be a violation of basic principles of consent and free will. Any future attempts at expansion through deceptive bonding ceremonies will be considered acts of aggression. The crystal finally separated from Jake's hand and fell to the floor, where it cracked and went dark. The neural connection with Lysa snapped like a broken string, leaving Jake feeling strangely empty. Lisa approached him as the crowd began to disperse. Jake, I want you to know that my feelings for you were real, even if everything else was a lie. I know, Jake said. I could feel it through the link. If we had met under different circumstances, without the deception and manipulation, what would your answer have been? Jake looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the beautiful alien who had tried to conquer his world, but a person trapped by duty and tradition who had found something real in the middle of a lie. Jake pressed his consciousness through the weak neural link with everything he had. The connection felt like trying to shout through a broken telephone, but he pushed harder, sending out a desperate mental call across the void of space. Help! Me! Lisa! Please! For a moment, nothing happened. The Zalari agents moved closer, their weapons drawn and pointed at Jake and Lisa. Vexakar smiled coldly, confident in his victory. Then the station's lights flickered. What was that? One of the Zalari agents asked, looking around nervously. The lights flickered again, and this time the artificial gravity wavered slightly. Everyone in the corridor stumbled as their feet briefly left the floor. Something's interfering with the station's power grid, Lisa whispered. Vexkar activated a communication device on his wrist. Report. What's happening to the station? A panicked voice responded in the Zalari language. Jake couldn't understand the words, but through his link with Lisa, he caught fragments of meaning. Something about unauthorized access to the station's computer systems. Something about a ship that wasn't supposed to be there. Impossible, Vexkar muttered. How did she get here so fast? The corridor suddenly filled with a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Jake recognized it immediately. It was the same harmonic frequency as Zalari music, but much more powerful. The sound made the Zalari agents clutch their heads in pain. Neural disruption frequency, Lisa realized. Someone's broadcasting directly into their brains. A new voice echoed through the station's communication system, speaking in perfect English with a familiar musical accent. This is Princess Lysa, Carthel of the Zalari Empire. I order all Zalari personnel to withdraw from this station immediately. Sister, Vexkar spat, his voice strained against the neural disruption. You have no authority here. The Empress sent us. The Empress is not here, I am. And as third daughter of the Imperial House, I outrank you, brother. Jake felt a surge of hope through the mental link. Lisa had somehow traveled across space to help him, despite the risk to herself. "You're a traitor to your own species," Vexcar accused, though he was still holding his head against the painful harmonics. "I'm trying to save our species from its own stupidity," Lisa's voice replied through the speakers. "The old ways of conquest are ending. Jake Martinez proved that. We can either adapt or be destroyed by our own arrogance." The neural disruption frequency increased, and the Zalari agents began to retreat down the corridor. But Vexcar remained, pulling out a different type of weapon, something that looked like a crystalline rod. "If I can't take you alive?" "Jake." "Martinez, I'll make sure no one else can benefit from your resistance," he said, raising the weapon. Before he could fire, the corridor filled with a brilliant blue light. When Jake's vision cleared, Lisa was standing between him and her brother, her own crystal weapon drawn and pointed at Vexcar's chest. "Lower your weapon, brother," she said calmly. "This ends now. You would kill your own blood for this human?" "I would kill anyone who threatens an innocent person," Lisa replied. "Zalari honor used to mean something. When did we become nothing more than sophisticated pirates?" Jake watched the siblings face off, feeling the tension through his mental link with Lisa. Her emotions were a storm of determination, fear, and sadness. She didn't want to hurt her brother, but she would if necessary. "The tribunal declared his freedom," Lisa continued. "We are bound by interspecies law to respect that decision. To break it now makes us no better than common criminals." "The Empress." "The Empress is wrong." Lisa's voice was firm. "And when we return home, I intend to tell her so." For a long moment, the two Zalari stared at each other. Finally, Vexcar lowered his weapon. "You've changed, sister. That human has corrupted you." "That human has shown me what honor really means," Lisa replied. "Something I thought I understood until I met him." Vexcar backed away, signaling to his remaining agents. "This isn't over. The Empress will not forget this betrayal. Tell the Empress that her third daughter challenges the old ways in the name of true Zalari honor," Lisa said. "Tell her that conquest through deception and force is not worthy of our people." The Zalari agents retreated, leaving Jake, Lisa, and Lisa alone in the corridor. The station's alarms were still blaring, but the immediate danger seemed to be over. "Thank you," Jake said, looking at Lisa. "But how did you get here so fast? And how did you know I was in trouble?" "I never left," Lisa admitted. "I've been hiding on this station for weeks, in the lower maintenance levels. I knew my people would try something like this eventually." "You've been living in hiding?" "Why?" Lisa holstered her weapon and turned to face him fully. "Because I realized something during the tribunal. You were right about choice versus duty. I spent my whole life following orders, doing what was expected of me. But when I saw what my actions had done to you, I had to choose for myself what kind of person I wanted to be." Jake felt her emotions through their link. Shame, regret, but also a strange kind of hope. "I can't undo what I did to you," she continued, "but I can try to prevent it from happening to others. I've been working with the station's technical staff to develop better defenses against Zalari infiltration methods." "That's incredibly dangerous." "For you," Lisa pointed out. "If your people find out you're helping their enemies—" "You're not our enemies," Lisa said firmly. "You're just people who refuse to be conquered. There's a difference." Admiral Collins and Commander Hayes arrived with a security team, having heard about the incident. They looked surprised to see Lisa standing with Jake instead of against him. "Princess Lisa," Admiral Collins said carefully, We weren't aware you were still on the station. I apologize for the deception, Admiral, but I felt it necessary to remain close in case my people attempted something like this. And now? Lisa looked at Jake, and he felt her uncertainty through their connection. Now I have a choice to make. I can return to the Zalari Empire and face whatever punishment awaits me, or, Jake prompted, or I can formally request asylum from the Federation of Free Worlds and continue working to reform Zalari expansion policies from the outside. Admiral Collins looked shocked. You want to defect? I want to choose my own path, Lisa said. Something Jake taught me was possible. Jake felt a complex mix of emotions through their link. Lisa was afraid of being cut off from her people and her culture, but she was also excited about the possibility of finally making her own decisions. What would happen to you if you went back? Jake asked. At best, exile to a remote world. At worst... Lisa shrugged. The Empress doesn't tolerate defiance well. Then don't go back, Lisa said simply. Stay here and help us. It's not that simple, Lisa replied. If I defect, it could be seen as an act of war by the Empire, or it could be seen as proof that even Zalari citizens believe their expansion methods are wrong, Admiral Collins pointed out. Your defection might encourage others to resist. Jake could feel Lisa's internal struggle through their connection. She wanted to stay, wanted to help, but she was terrified of the consequences. What do you want to do? Jake asked quietly. Not what your duty demands, not what's safest, but what you actually want. Lisa was quiet for a long moment, staring out the corridor window at the stars. When she finally spoke, her voice was stronger than Jake had ever heard it. I want to help people choose their own futures instead of having them chosen for them. I want to use my knowledge of Zalari tactics to protect others from what I did to you. And I want to prove that Zalari can be more than conquerors. Then, stay, Jake said. We'll figure out the politics later. Through their mental link, Jake felt Lisa's fear transform into determination. For the first time in her life, she was choosing her own path instead of following orders. Very well, she said formally. I, Princess Lisa Carthel, third daughter of the Zalari Empress, formally request political asylum from the Federation of Free Worlds. Admiral Collins smiled grimly. Asylum granted. Welcome to the Resistance, Princess. As they walked back toward the diplomatic quarters, Jake realized that everything had changed again. What started as a simple first contact mission had become something much larger, a galaxy-wide movement toward freedom and choice. And somehow, he and Lisa had become the unlikely symbols of that movement.